Washington now by former U.S. diplomat Priscilla Clapp, senior advisor for the U.S. Institute of Peace. Thank you for joining us on France 24.
Thank you.
You were chief of mission in Burma from 1999 to 2002. It was a time when Aung San Suu Kyi was, well, as Sanam was describing, an icon, a beacon for peaceful resistance. She was put under house arrest while you were there. Has your perception of her changed in the past 2 weeks?
No, I simply don't accept the narrative that we just heard. There was indeed a terrorist attack in Rakhine. It came from outside. It was perpetrated by people in the Rohingya diaspora living in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia coming in through Bangladesh. And they have killed a lot of security forces. This started in October, and the latest attack was timed to follow the recommendations, the presentation of the recommendations of the Kofi Annan International Commission on Rakhine, which Aung San Suu Kyi has accepted and agreed to implement. These recommendations call for a long-term solution there. She was already working on it when it was disrupted by this latest terrorist attack. Their tactics are terrorists, there's no question about it. She's not calling the entire Rohingya population terrorists. She is referring to a group of people who are going around with guns, machetes, and IEDs and killing their own people, in addition to Buddhists, Hindus, and others that get in their way. They've killed a lot of security forces, and they are wreaking havoc in the region. The people who are fleeing out into Bangladesh are not only fleeing the response of the security forces, they're fleeing their own radical groups because they've been attacking Rohingya, and particularly the leadership, who were trying to work with the government on the citizenship process and other humanitarian efforts that were underway there. This has all been sort of thrown into a cocked hat right now with the confusion that has been sown by this latest attack.
Yeah, but
and
more than 100.
The international community has to sort out the facts before making accusations.
No, it was an attack by militants against the armed forces in northwest Burma that triggered this. That's undoubted. But the question is, shouldn't Aung San Suu Kyi have had at least a word of sympathy for the more than 125,000 refugees who fled to Bangladesh?
I'm sure that she does have sympathy for them. I don't know. She has made a number of statements recently, and it is not clear how many have actually fled to Bangladesh. They have already told Bangladesh that they will work with them to return them safely to Rakhine State when the time comes. Right now, many of their villages have been torched, and they were not torched by the military. The military has done some damage. I won't deny that. But the militants themselves have been going around torching these villages.
Should Burma's authorities pick up on that call made by Norway to let in humanitarian aid groups?
They are letting them in, but they can't let them into the area where there is so much violence going on, because it's dangerous. There were many humanitarian aid groups in there already, but they have made their own decision to leave under the current circumstances, to pull back. They're probably in Sidway or some other parts of Rakhine State where it's safer right now. Some international press, some press have been allowed in with security protection, but it's still a very dangerous area, and these people are still marauding.
Now, Priscilla, earlier you said that Aung San Suu Kyi does have sympathy with the Rohingya community. Why is it that we're hearing reports of landmines being laid between the border of Myanmar and, of course, Bangladesh? Does that show a lack of sympathy? That's to prevent the Rohingya from returning to their country.
Who is laying the landmines?
Well, reportedly,
the landmines are also in the hands of the terrorists. We don't know who's doing that.
Bangladesh squarely accuses authorities in Burma of laying those landmines.
Well, that may be so. They may be accusing the Burmese, but that's not necessarily who's doing it. Nobody really knows what the situation is on the ground.
We've heard criticism from the likes of Desmond Tutu and other Nobel laureates asking for Aung San Suu Kyi to speak out more. What's your reaction to that?
I understand the situation she's in. I've lived there, and it's a very divisive society. There are many different ethnic groups, many religions, and with the transition that's going on, they have a lot of freedoms now, and some of them are abusing those freedoms. There are extremists on the Buddhist side who have become very political, including the main opposition party. They're using the anti-Muslim sentiment for their own political purposes. Rakhine politicians are doing the same thing. So if she wades into the middle of this very volatile internal political situation with a lot of harsh words, one way or the other, either against the military or against the Buddhists, she's going to be dead meat.
So what should the international community be doing at this particular point in time?
I think the international community is already on the job. You have to look at what the Kofi Annan Commission did. They made a very thorough investigation of the whole situation. They came up with a whole set, a very comprehensive set of recommendations pointing out what would lead to a long-term solution, which involves changing the hearts and minds of people, in addition to economic development to improve the conditions that everybody's living in there. It's a very poor state, and there's competition for resources. And there are a lot of groups now arming themselves on both sides and acting as militias. All of this has to be dealt with comprehensively. Now, she has accepted those recommendations, and she has set up a government commission consisting of all of the concerned ministries who have the resources and means to address this. She's also setting up an advisory board of international members so that the international community can participate in helping to implement these recommendations, and that's exactly what we should be doing. The United States has already been on the ground in Rakhine State doing, providing comprehensive assistance to health, economic development, and human rights education.
But again, for the time being, no public statement from Aung San Suu Kyi expressing sympathy for the Rohingyas fleeing the fighting.
Well, that's one piece of a very, very large puzzle. You will hear from her in September when she comes to the UN.
Priscilla
But
Clapp,
I don't think you're going to see her speaking out loudly while she's still at home facing a very hostile public.
All right, Priscilla Clapp, I want to thank you so much for joining us from Washington. I also want to thank Sanam Chantier for being with us here in the studio. Stay with us. There's more to come here on France.